Hey everybody, welcome back to Battle Ready Inc. So BT9 release is literally this week. By the time this gets posted, it'll be this week, and we're super ecstatic for it. There's so many new decks coming out, and you know what we got to do? We've got to take a look at which ones we think are going to be meta relevant and which ones might fall by the wayside. So depending on what kind of player you are, this video might really help you in choosing which deck you want to start gunning for first. Don't forget, our new memory marker this month is Gumimon. So if you're playing some sort of Rapidmon deck or just a Terriermon fan in general, this is a great memory marker to set up for your deck, especially with green decks like Grandis and just green hybrid in general being really popular right now. Definitely a great memory marker to pick up. You can find this on our Etsy page, link in the description below. Also there, you can find all of our previous memory markers that we've had on the channel, as well as some of our Battle Ready Inc. merch. And today, joining me, I've got DigiWatch here. He's been with us before on the channel when we've looked at some previous cards from previous sets. He's going to kind of help me bounce some ideas off of for this. So that way, whenever I give my opinion of which ones we think are going to do, which decks are going to do well, we have some other insight beyond just my own. So you can check his page out. I've got it pulled up for you right here. Does a lot of like Market Watch, that sort of thing. So if you're really into Market Watch, a fantastic place to go to. Honestly, I'm actually really excited about what we've got set up for our tier list today, because unlike the one that we had for EX2 here, which video did great, thank you guys so much for watching, this is where we ended with for our prediction for last format, and I think it's still pretty spot on. Yellow Hybrid did really well. Imperial did really well at first, but I think it sort of fell off. I mean, it still gets tops here and there, but not in the large quantities like we expected. And D-Reaper, it's like one way or the other. Either it does really well or it's just like no show, like completely doesn't do anything. So it seems to be in a really awkward position. Blue Hybrid right now, though, like that's like the big hot ticket thing, don't you think? Blue Hybrid is like the one everyone's playing right now at the end of EX2.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Blue Hybrid has not gone away. I just think that the consistency from like just being able to devolve right onto your tamers, as well as have just the normal way of putting in breeding and stuff, just makes the deck really powerful. And it seems like every set it just gets a little bit of extra support, just keeping it on the front line.
And I would say the only one that I feel like I didn't do justice on this list, like everything else feels pretty much right where it's at. I think Red Hybrid was the one that's like really showing its colors as well. Same with Blue Hybrid here. It definitely should have been way up here and way high in A tier, I think, for sure. So I think we're going to definitely do a little bit more justice for it this time around, because I think for next format, it's actually in a pretty solid position as a deck. It might still be a little bit slow, but it's still extremely, extremely powerful. So we're going to go ahead and pull it up. I went ahead and have the final version, or at least for now. We might make a couple changes here and there as we go, but I just don't want people to like skip all the way to the end and miss the discussion about why certain decks are here and not actually see it. So if people are wanting to take a look at it, we've got it pulled up, and so we're just going to start kind of making our way through this. So right off the bat, I don't have anything in S tier this time. So originally, I debated keeping Yellow Hybrid, and when we're talking about Yellow Hybrid, this is, I think it doesn't matter which version. If you're going with a Rapidmon build with yellow rookies, or you're going with red rookies and then incorporating a lot of red options, I think both decks are pretty much neck and neck. I don't think they deserve their own spot, because I think they're literally both so much not similar, but so much on the same power level that wherever one goes, the other one goes there too. That's why we have just the one spot for Yellow Hybrid, even though there's like two different distinctive builds for it. I think they're right there on par with each other. The only reason I didn't want to put it in S tier, because I feel like this is very much almost like a rock, paper, scissors format, whereas Yellow Hybrid is going to do really well against like the OTK decks, so Alphamon and Grandis both, but then it kind of falls off, Blue Hybrid, right? You can't really control Blue Hybrid with all those option cards, so Blue Hybrid has a really good matchup, just like it's always had against Yellow Hybrid. hybrid. And then same for something like red hybrid has a great matchup there. So just because it doesn't blow out every deck, I didn't want to put it in S tier. And clearly, we've seen the other hybrid decks still hanging in there and doing well. So as long as those decks are still being played, I don't want to put yellow hybrid in S tier. But besides that, I think it's still phenomenal. I mean, like, even when it goes against those decks, it can still beat them. Like, it's not like it's a hard lose to those. I think it's just more of an even match compared to, like, the OTK decks, like Grandis and Alphamon. Like, they have a whole lot of power to them, but they really suffer against that deck. So I think keeping it in A tier is fine. We could maybe argue bumping it up to a little bit higher. Like, I know myself personally, if I want to win a tournament, probably going to play yellow hybrid in BT9. But if I'm just looking to have fun, I might look elsewhere. It's going to be one of those decks. I think it's very much a, oh, here we go again. We're going to see that deck. No one wants to play against sort of thing. Because it's going to be a powerhouse.
I agree. I mean, I'm on the fence about it just because I did say, like I said, I think S tier could be where we want to put it, but also this deck has not really seen, that's not really out yet, so we don't have any testing really done unless you're doing it on Tabletop Simulator or other kind of like simulations like that. So I think it is very reasonable to keep it in A tier, whether it's going to be at the top of A tier or lower A tier or go to S tier or whatnot. I agree with you. I think it's like a more competitive deck. And in this current, right now, what we're just looking at, all these decks, I think that it is totally fine being where it is.
Okay. Yeah, and just to clarify for everyone else, this is just prediction, right? Like, this isn't like we have some foresight or anything like that, or we don't even have much data to pull on. Remember, our format often ends up being drastically different from JP. What does well in JP doesn't really hardly ever translate well to us. I mean, we've just seen that time and time again that, yeah, you can look at some really powerful lists from JP, but if you want to look at their format as a whole and what does well, it can be really, really sketchy. So just kind of keep that in mind for you viewers out there that this is just prediction, right? So we're just we've seen the decks, we've seen them perform and how powerful they are just individually on their own, like through watching other format players playing it, watching JP players play it, or just testing it on Tabletop Simulator, just kind of seeing how they perform and just kind of making a prediction off of that. So next up, I've got Grandis here, and I'm not saying Grandis is like the second most powerful. I think these next three are kind of on par with each other. Like, Grandis and Alpha both feel very on par with each other. But that said, Grandis has continued to perform well into JP all the way through BT10, whereas Alphamon has fallen off in BT10, even though Alphamon is still very powerful. So it's everything Alphamon and X Antibody already has, which has already been pretty solid. I feel like it's just been missing a few things here and there. But we've seen representation of it, just not topping representation of it. But now, with all this new support, a new Alphamon, a level 7, which is so crazy. So, like, you can swing with your Mega, do a bunch of stuff. You can Evo into this guy, and then gain a ton of memory back. I mean, it's just so crazy, especially if you Evo for 3 with the Aryuken and gain back, like, 7 memory off of it. Like, that's so crazy that you could Evo for 3 and then gain 7 memory. So then essentially it's a Evo gain 4. Like, that feels so powerful. So I definitely want to keep it up here in A tier. But like versus Grandis can just like, it literally is an OTK engine. It can just swing and punch for all the security, and depending on what they have, they could go like double Mimi and promote up a rookie and then swing for game with a rookie, right? So do you think either one of them kind of beats out the other one? Like, what do you think their power level is?
Well, like you said, like I think that the green has a little bit more speed. I've seen matches done in like 5 minutes with Grandis, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, whole matches, not just a game, but a whole match done. Yeah. I mean, if they draw the pieces, I mean, that's it. I mean, that's literally the only thing holding that deck back is how fast can they draw into all the combo pieces. And they run a lot, right? It's 4 Grands and then 4 Grandis. I mean, that's a lot of Megas, but I mean, you need both of them to do the combo. And so, but it doesn't take much to draw into when you run that many copies.
But I will give Alpha a few things on its side. Now, the other Alphamon, not the level 7, the one that's the new level 6 Alphamon, I think it's a rare in this set, gets you to be able to de-digivolve one of your opponent's Digimon, which is a very powerful effect. We know how powerful de-digivolve is. It's one of a very good way of just being able to gain back control on your turn. In addition, it has a new option coming out called, well, it's not maybe for the deck itself, but it's called Congo or Kongu. And basically what that card says is until the next turn, if your opponent hits into security or you play it, they cannot attack you with any card that has a play cost or 7 or less. And cards can't be added to the security stacks by your opponent's effect. So against yellow, security gain, that is a very powerful effect. In addition, if your opponent with Grand Kawagas, yes, they can attack with that card, but they can't really attack with anything else that may not reach the requirements.
Right.
So the fact that Alphamon can't play that option just makes a very, very even matchup. So for me, I would say Grandis is a little faster than Alpha, but I do think Alpha has a little bit more versatility versus multiple different decks.
That's totally fair. Yeah, I didn't even consider the Congo originally. Yeah, because I mean that turns off Jet Sylphie from attacking, and we've seen a lot of these Jet Sylphie decks playing like what is it, Atomic Blaster that gives it security attack +1, and they just swing with the Jet Sylphie. And then Blue Hybrid, like that's a really good tech card against those. And like you're saying, even against Grandis can sure swing in for a bunch, but then they can't finish the game, right? They can't attack with a rookie or even a hybrid on top of Mimi, whatever the case may be. They usually can't finish the game with that black option in play. So yeah, that's a great point. Like that definitely helps keep it, I think, in a great power position for sure. So next up, we got Blue Hybrid. I mean, Blue Hybrid really hasn't changed. I don't think it really gets much utility out of this set, but it's still just super solid, right? I mean, everything it does is just very efficient in its play style, no matter what kind of play style you play it as.
I will say that I actually think that Blue Hybrid is going to maybe, and this is just my opinion, maybe going to go down a tier, or at least go to the bottom of A, maybe even get to the rogue level, because I think that even though it has such a good adaptability of being able to trash your opponent's sources and stun your opponent's sources, because this whole new format really is focused on digivolving almost like twice the stack. Like you're going into your level 3, then you're going into your X antibody level 3, then you're going into your 4, X antibody level 4, and just continuously moving that up.
All right, so yeah, right here we got X Antibody pulled up, the option card. Inheritable is all turns X Antibody can't be trashed from this Digimon's Digivolution cards by card effects, and so it's going to be the bottom card. So, I mean, I guess that would kind of just prevent everything from getting trashed because it's the bottom card, right? So, kind of would make sense there.
So I would say that it is going to be a good deck. I would just probably put it a little bit more toward the end of A than right in the middle.
That's fair. Yeah, I think it's got a good matchup still against Yellow Hybrid, just because Yellow Hybrid can't really touch it because it's all Tamers and stuff. But it does have a weak matchup against some of these other decks, like, yeah, Alphamon that's going to Evo up in Raising Area a whole bunch. And then, yeah, with all the X Antibody stuff, just being able to, Evo multiple times for super cheap. Yeah, and has an insane amount of sources underneath. Not really much you can do against that. But yet still solid against some of these other things, I think. Maybe even put it above D Reaper there. So yeah, we'll put it right about there. I think that's fine. So next we got yeah.
Demolishes D Reaper.
Yeah. So next we got Imperial, and Imperial is kind of another one of those cards that just doesn't really change a whole lot with this set, but I think it's still fast, right? And I think that's the big power play here of Imperial is that it's going to be faster than pretty much all these other decks. I think the only thing it runs into is against, of course, Yellow Hybrid. If Yellow Hybrid has that moment of being able to recover back, or if they hit into option cards of Yellow Hybrid, that's like truly decimates them, because jamming doesn't do anything when you're just hitting into a bunch of option cards that delete you or DP minus you. So I still think it's worthy of A tier though, just because it's good against pretty much everything else. It's super solid against everything else, just because how fast it is. It can outpace a lot of these other decks, even though a lot of these other decks have more power. But Imperial is still just so fast. I mean, Pyldra swing twice, Dragon Mode, make another Pyldra. I mean, you've played the deck. I mean, we've had mirror matches before, so you know exactly the speed that this deck can potentially have.
Yeah, I'm very excited actually, because this is gonna be my experiment deck for the format.
So next we got D Reaper here. Man, I don't even know if I want to keep it in A tier. I feel like this card is, or this deck is good, and sometimes does incredible work, and then other times it just doesn't do anything. Like I can't explain it. I don't know if people just aren't taking it that much, or like the really good pilots in this game, the really good players are just being really dedicated to the decks that they're playing and doing well with those decks, and aren't bothering with the D Reaper. I don't know, because I see people rage about it all the time, like how good it is, and when people play it, it just decimates. But then the past couple weeks, we haven't really seen it do anything. So do you think it's gonna do you think it's gonna do anything in the BT9 meta?
Personally, I don't think so. I think where it should be now is probably maybe the top of Rogue, and I only say that because I've seen the same people. I've heard the same people at my locals and watching regional matches and just even playing in big events myself. And I really think that the D Reaper is a really interesting archetype. I'm personally not a fan of it, but I've watched the different decks, whether they're playing black, whether they're playing red, whether they're playing yellow, and they're very much a good controlling deck. But with so many other decks coming out in this format, I really think that it just gets power crept by just so many other of these decks.
Yeah. I think bottom of A, it's like you said, it's very dependent on how fast they can get into it. It's like watching the doomsday clock slowly count down of, okay, how many sources you at now? All right, I've got 1-2 turns maybe before I lose. But that's kind of the same thing for Grandis, right? Is Grandis is like, okay, well, how fast can I get into my OTK, right? And I think Grandis basically is kind of the same premise of, I'm just here to OTK super fast, and if I can draw into my pieces, I mean, I can beat you in 3 turns. D Reaper can't do that, right? And D Reaper, I think, absolutely gets smoked by Grandis. Even if they want to throw a couple gatekeepers on there, who cares? They're swinging for 3 security checks. It's going to take a lot more than 1, even 2 gatekeepers, and especially if they're going to be suspending those gatekeepers and then just swinging and piercing over them anyways. Like, I don't think Grandis even cares about Gatekeeper. That's like an auto win, I think, for them, because they're just going to outpace the Reaper so fast. And even a lot of these other decks. I think a lot of these other decks just kind of really power creep D Reaper a good amount. So yeah, I think bottom of A tier, because when you look at like a lot of the rogue decks, I think it kind of beats those out a little bit, depending on matches, of course. But Gatekeeper is still just a very powerful card, and if you do the combo with Tactical Retreat to recover it back in there, and then it gets hit, and then it recovers, and then they've got Security Attack -1, and it's just such a stupid combo, stupid strong combo. Next we got Gaiomon or Samudramon. I don't know if we've got an official, like, if they've shown the official English card yet of which name they're going with, but either way, I'm super excited for this. This is my favorite card, or my favorite Digimon, I should say. Not my favorite card, but my favorite Digimon in all of the Digimon franchise, just because it's War Greymon wearing samurai armor. I think he looks super, super cool. And then it's Black War Greymon, though, right? It's just a Black War Greymon deck with a new Mega that's also very, very powerful, and just really kind of completes that deck. It was always a big debate of what your secondary Mega should be in the Black War Greymon deck, but now it's like no contest. It's like 100% you're going to play the Gaiomon. And it's still just doing everything it's been doing before. I think it's still super solid. If you want to go for red package, you can compete with these other OTK decks, right? Like a lot of these other powerhouse decks, it's red, so it's got access to a delicate plan, so it makes it a great matchup against the yellow hybrid deck. Yeah, I think it's in a great position, being able to attack your opponent's unsuspended Digimon, and it's got massive DP, it's got Blitz, right? It's got Blitz and Reboot. Depending on what your inheritables are, you can have Blocker on it. I mean, it's everything red and black combined perfectly into a Digimon, and you just get access to all those great things. Also, it's treated as War Greymon, so you can use your Nokias on it to reduce its Evo cost. So anytime you get to use like a Nokia deck, I feel like those decks decks are super efficient. So yeah, I just feel like it's going to be in a way better position. Black War Greymon was kind of roguish and like had a good matchup like against D-Reaper because it could swing over the Mother, right? Which was always super powerful, but then kind of suffered because it was a little bit slower against some of these other fast decks. But I think it's just going to be in a really good position in this format.
What I'm really excited about is how much better consistency we're going to have with it in BT9. Because don't forget, you also get the support cards that really are for War Greymon X, but they also work in the Black War Greymon deck as well, like Agumon X Antibody, Greymon X Antibody. You can play copies of those cards just to make the deck a little bit more consistent. You can play, like I said before, the two cost option Congo, and also you can play cards like, which I see in a lot of other lists, the Maki, which is looking at the top 3 of your deck, and usually with the build that I see a lot of people going with for Black War Greymon, they're playing Maki as a way of getting their Tapirmon, which can digivolve from black or red, and one dual-colored black card with black in it that you can add, which basically gets you your Megas or your Ultimates and practically half your deck. It can reduce cost as well for the Maki to be played in that deck, and it just builds up the consistency so much better than in BT8.
For sure, yeah, and you're right, totally about the X antibody stuff. Just being able to evo for 0 draw card. Like X antibody decks are going to be way more consistent than a lot of these other decks. So like we've seen Pyldramon or Imperial decks brick a little bit. They don't have access to that sort of thing, so they can be a little bit slower. Yeah, they are fast decks, but if they brick, they're in a really bad position. Whereas a lot of these other decks, these newer decks, are being super consistent just because they get such an insane amount of draw power. So I think that's definitely going to help it out. Next up, we got armors. Basically still the same old armor stuff that's like super aggro, super gas against some of these other slower decks. I think that's why it's in A tier, or I want to put it in A tier, is just because like Grandis can be slow. Like we did say it was super fast matches and done in 5 minutes, but if it doesn't just draw the absolute like boss hand, it can definitely suffer. So armors just being able to go super fast against most of these decks, I think is really good. But now that they got access to X antibody Magnamon, it has the defensive options too, right? Not literally option cards, but like defensive capabilities. And it's such a powerful card, which is being able to block multiple things of damage. So forcing the opponent to attack into it, and then essentially it armor purges and puts itself into security. So if like Grandis swings into it with piercing, right, it's not going to get its piercing off because the Digimon doesn't get deleted, right? So armor purge basically null and voids piercing. And then if you do have a Magna underneath it, that Magnamon can still block like normal. So it's almost like a double, like I don't even know how to like phrase it, right? Because you can block so much of your opponent, and then if they hit with something big, you just armor purge away the X antibody, and then you still have your Magnamon underneath it. And then there's even the option card that lets you digivolve it on top of any armor, so you can kind of like just whenever you need a defensive card, boom, you just play this bad boy out and go on the defense. And it's really nice just to have that versatility in the deck now. So yeah, I think it definitely deserves an S, or not S tier. No. It deserves A tier just because it does have a good matchup against a lot of these decks that we're seeing in A tier.
Yeah, so I 100% agree. So I will say that and this might add a little bit of bias to this list, but Magnamon X is going to be one of my decks I am going to work on the most. It combines my 2 favorite colors of the game, which is blue and yellow. So one of the things I really like about the deck is, like you said, to kind of do a little bit of both, of being able to recover some and also be able to armor purge as well. And we see how good some of these armor rush decks are doing in regional events, and just giving them a boss monster is just the cherry on top.
For sure. All right, and I can't stand this anymore. I'm moving D-Reaper down. I've got to do it. Yes. I don't feel like it. Like talking about all these other decks, I feel like yes, these are A tier. Every one of these decks we've talked about is A tier. But when we talk about D-Reaper, we're like, man, come on, really? This deck it's got this wrong with it, this wrong with it. I don't like it, whatever the case may be, I can't keep it in good conscience. I can't keep it in A tier anymore. So that is our A tier. We're going to jump down to Rogue tier. We're going to go through some of these a little bit faster. the ones that we already know, right? That we've seen for time and time again. They've been around for a while. Green Hybrid. I did have Green Hybrid, I think, in B tier last time. Definitely moving it up. It's still great. It's green, right? It's super efficient in everything it does. Evoing, searching. It's just a very powerful deck. It's got access to some really neat, intricate, or not intricate but interesting text that you can do. You can go, with the green rookie package and maybe do Terrier Mons and incorporate some Rapids, or you can go with the red, the Christmas route that we've seen a lot of times in the past. Running the red hybrids, and then so you can use like Atomic Blaster in the deck. I think it's still just a solid choice. It hasn't really changed, right? I guess you could incorporate Grandis if you wanted, but digibursting away stuff, you're not going to get the amount of digibursting as you want, because you're going to have the Tamer 4 and a 5 underneath, so you're going to be missing out a little bit there on your digiburst with the Grand Kuagamon. So I think it's just going to be the same green deck we've seen. Is there anything interesting new that it's getting from EX2 that changes it?
Honestly, there wasn't much I saw that came out of EX2, because you got all the stuff with Terriermon that added into it, and with BT9, with Grandis coming in there. I feel like Grandis just does a really good job with its own build, and I don't think it's possible to combine the engines of Terriermon and the Grandis engine. Even though I know it's really just like one card, but there are everything underneath it. It's too many cards to mesh together, in my opinion. So I don't think that people may try putting it out there, may try to do a Grandis Kuwagamon as their boss monster. I know that right now, at least in the winning list that have been like top, I think there was a top at the Ulti Cup for Card of Magica a few weeks ago, and he was playing 2 Shivamons and I think the Ancient Beetlemon package, and you can't cut Ancient Beetlemon, absolutely not, if you're playing that. So I don't think they really are able to use any of the boss monsters. However, they may be able to possibly use something like, there is a card coming out called Grandis Scissor, which is basically being able to suspend one of your opponent's Digimon, and then a Digimon with Insectoid traits can your opponent's Digimon. So that might be probably a card that they use. Kind of like going ahead, I think it's going to probably be a deck that maybe stays mid-rogue, or maybe even possibly a B tier deck if it gets outgrinded. But I don't think you can change anything too much from adding in BT9 cards.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I was like, it felt like B tier before, but then it was like, oh wow, it's actually gotten several tops here recently, so I should probably put it in rogue tier. And I think rogue tier is still pretty solid for it. It just does what it does. It's got a good, again, it's a hybrid deck, so it's a good matchup against yellow hybrid, just because they can't really do much against it. It does go up into megas though, which yellow hybrid likes to eat for lunch, so it's kind of awkward in that department. But I think in rogue is pretty comfortable, just because it's got moments where it can punch up into these other decks, but it can't punch up into all of them, I don't think. So next we got BL-Star, and I want to keep BL-Star probably in Rogue as well. It's just doing what it does, right? Even in JP, we saw this deck just continue just to do solid things. It just performs really well. It doesn't matter what cards come out. I think everything that it has already at its disposal is pretty great. It got some new tools that it can use in EX2, which was pretty nice for it, but I don't think in BT9 it really gets any tools. But it's still just a very solid deck, for a very control heavy deck. Depending on the matches it go against, like Fly Bullet can really decimate decks. The red one, what is it, Happy Bullet Showering, like if they go Grandis and that's all they have is the Grandis, and the Grandis swings in, yeah, I mean that just clears it right there. So I feel like it's got really good rogue potential against some of these decks. We'll just have to kind of keep an eye on it. I think it's still really fast when you want to get into that. All right, time to win. Let me just drop multiple BL stars and keep bringing out promotes with Rush, and then just kind of win off of that.
Yeah. So I would probably put it to top of Rogue. Honestly, I would honestly might even put it in the bottom of A, literally the last in A. And the only reason I say that is because I think about the format, and I think about how a lot of these decks stack up, and literally, I don't mean to make a say it like that, but um, a lot of these decks literally stack up. They stack up all the way to the top, and there is a card that people have been starting to tech in this current format called Howling Crusher, and it's all the way. I think it was BT1. It came out in. That is a 7 cost blue option, and it just trashes everything on your opponent's side of the field, and that is very relevant in this coming format against all these decks. We're talking about Grandis being able to OTK, and if it hits an option, it's done, it's dead. And same thing with Alphamon. Same thing with like Imperial if you don't play Delicate Plan. So it can really destroy a lot of these other decks if you're not careful. If you're being like smart, and a lot, again, like I said, a lot of these decks, they promote these huge stacks of cards. They're not going wide; they're going tall. And there is another card that they do kind of use in BT9, which is the I'm not going to try to say his name. It's a tamer. It's called Kairoshiro. Kairoshiro, I think it's called. And it's if you have a level 7, or sorry, if you have a card that's a level 5 or higher, and you have 7 or less cards in hand, you can suspend the tamer to draw 1. So it just gives you an extra draw 1. It's nothing too crazy out of it, but it's the blue tamer that they do play in that set over the TK that they're currently playing right now. So I 100% agree that it probably should stay in in the rogue section right over here. Or if you want to feel generous, you can play it at the end of A. But I really think that you will see a couple of tops with Beelstar in the BT9 format.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's purple deck, and I feel like purple decks, as well as BL-Star in general, has always been one of those decks that it's like the really good players, the really like dedicated players that really stick to it, can make it work, and they'll adapt it to any format and then be able to take on whatever the meta is. And I feel like 100%, it's like always at the top of Rogue tier, because there's always some crazy player out there that just comes up with some wild text that just completely decimates the meta, and then it'll strike like lightning once or twice, and then it'll just disappear again for the rest of the format. So yeah, I think top of Rogue tier is pretty solid for it. Next we got the red hybrid. Again, red hybrid is kind of the same thing as green hybrid. It's just doing a whole lot of what it's already done. It just swings for a ton of security checks, similar to Grandis, as well as Alphamon, and it's red, so it can have access to a Delicate Plan, which gives it a good matchup against yellow hybrid. So like any sort of security control style deck, it's very solid against that. And it even with out the Delicate Plan, it has the level 5 that has it basically as an inheritable anyways. So it's just a really solid deck against these. I think it just runs into the issue of it's not going to be as fast. Oh, it's still the same premise of like the OTK-ness, but you don't have access to the X antibody stuff, right? So you're not going to get a ton of draws like Alphamon does, or Grandis with its extreme amount of draw, search, as well as just the fact that it plays so many copies of so much stuff that it can get into any sort of stack. It doesn't matter what the stack is, and then just OTK through it. So I feel like it's like an Alphamon and Grandis deck, just like a little bit neutered, just because it's a tad bit slower.
It's going to blow through green. It's going to blow through Reaper. Even if they do recover, it's going to blow through Beelstar. Like, it's going to blow through all those things, especially with the Aldemon underneath it. So I would 100% put it right there.
The only caveat to Beelstar is that when Beelstar wants to go fast, it can just hit the gas and then go like, okay, I'm just going to go level 4 rush on you. And I think red hybrid is just slow enough that it can outpace red hybrid, and not even need to fill up its trash for Beelstar to start doing Beelstar things. That's what I really like about the Beelstar deck, is that it's like two different play styles crammed into one deck. You have the control aspect when you need it with Beelstar, or late game Beelstar when you just need to start rushing with promotes and just start playing with them off the nail bones for free. But then early game, it's just got this level 4 package that just likes to slam its freaking head into security between the Eismon, the Dobermons, whatever it is you're playing there, or the Ogremons that get 2 security checks, right? So when it needs to hit the gas it can. And against Red Hybrid, that's 100% what you do. You just swing in there randomly, especially because they don't even play a lot of Tamers in Red Hybrid anymore, so you don't really have much to fear for like filling up their field with hybrids anymore. So I think just under that feels pretty good. But yeah, I think you're right. It probably does go over these other two. Next, we got the new Dorugora X Antibody, and I think this deck will do well, but I don't think it's as good as Alphamon, simply because it doesn't have necessarily the mega that, like the Alphamon level 7 is. It's a fantastic one, whereas this one relies on Dexmon. It requires a lot of trash setup, and any of these purple decks that require a heavy amount dependent on the trash tend to be a lot slower, and in this format you can't be slow, right? Grandis, if they just get an inkling of a fastness to them, they're going to blow you out. This deck doesn't really do anything against Yellow Hybrid. I don't think it has a good matchup there. But against the other decks in A tier, I think it could definitely punch up there, just depending on the pilot and the play style. But it does have the nice consistency, right? You have the really good draw power to it because it's an X Antibody deck. Makes it pretty efficient. I don't know. It feels kind of awkward. It's strong and powerful, but slow. And when it does pop off, it's not like it's popping off for like a ton of security checks, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to be really slow with my Red Hybrid or really slow with my Alphamon, and then I'm going to build up. And then once I'm there, I just pop off. Like this deck, like once it builds up, okay, what'd you build up into, right? Like, what are you going to do now? I don't know. It feels kind of awkward to me.
I agree. I think that it's not as fast. I mean, yes, you have good players and they could figure out strategies to make it work a little bit better and more consistent, but I just think compared to what you have in A tier, it really is not going to do too much too quickly, and it gives your opponent time to build up a counter to it. So I would put it, I would put it closer to the end of Rogue, even putting it possibly into B tier, but because there's definitely a few on these lists I'm looking at, I'm like, yeah, I might put that in lower. Yeah, that's where I would put it.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Next, we got the Gallantmon X Antibody. This is basically Gallantmon like we've already have it, but with EX2, but just with more utility now, right? Because it basically doubles everything all of it's got already. And a big problem it has currently is it's a brick heavy deck. It's red. Red just bricks for some reason. I don't know what it is, but with being able to evo for a 0, it's going to get a whole lot more draw power to it. It's got really good control, but I think it's kind of awkward because when you're controlling stuff against Yellow Hybrid, there's not really much to control, right? They have a bunch of Tamers. What do you do there? It is a red deck, so it does have access to a delicate plan, so it can at least have a good time whenever it swings in there. But it's not like a traditional red deck with lots of security checks. It just gets to trash for free, which again is also very powerful against Yellow Hybrid, so it's just kind of an awkward thing there. But I don't think it's going to outpace or do better than these other decks like Alpha and Grandis and things like that. When you're controlling the field, there's no point of controlling the field if people are just hiding in raising area, right? It's got really good control power, but it's also dependent on your opponent filling up their own trash. If they're not going to fill up their own trash, and they're just going to keep evoing like mad in raising area, then your Gallantmon deck just kind of dies.
Having the ability to play a delicate plan is also very powerful. So where it would stand, I think that it should still be in Rogue, in my opinion. I think that maybe it should be a little bit right after D-Reaper and before the Green Hybrid. That's probably where I would see it. And looking above actually at the A tier, I'm just thinking like, which decks would this have the advantage on? And I think the only one that it honestly has an advantage on is maybe the Imperial deck, or the ability to delete their level 4s when they start to go into Dragon mode and just be able to delete that over. So I don't really see a great matchup against really any of the decks that are above it. I think that Gallantmon is a slightly little bit slower than some of the other decks.
Yep. All right, next we got Metal Garurumon here, X Antibody. This consistency beast of a card, like literally can get into its mega and have an insane huge hand. Like this deck is pretty wild, right? It can do so much.
This is the one that I bought by promos from a fellow Digimon player at my locals a few months ago, actually, like right when like BT7 was like midway through BT7. I was like, yeah, I know that this is the deck coming out on BT9, and this is what I want to play. And so I have every piece. This deck is sitting on my shelf, just waiting to get the rest of the pieces from BT9. From BT9. Now, trying to stick my bias out of this, though, I will definitely say, I still think that this is going to be a huge meta contender. So I know it is in Rogue right now, but I honestly think it's an A tier deck. And I'll tell you why. Imperial Dramon had the ability to swing multiple times at your opponent's security and just be able to check so much out of it. And be able to just go wide and do a lot of different things that way. With Metal Garurumon, you can do the same thing. The whole point is you go into the Were Garurumon from the promo one. I get so when you attack, you can unsuspend this Digimon. You're gaining DP from everything underneath it. So you're being able to swing, do that. It gains. You can go into additional security checks. It has the effect of if you have 8 or more cards in hand, it gains +1 security as an inherited. So then you go into your Metal Garurumon, you swing with that, and you do multiple checks. It's another version of an OTK deck that I've seen both in the JP format and then in a lot of people who I've spoken to who I've asked what are they playing, and a lot of them are saying Metal Garurumon. So I do think it's going to be an A tier deck. I'm not really certain where it's going to go, but I would probably put it within the top 4. So I would say it's probably a little faster than the Imperial Dramon deck, believe it or not.
Wow, that's definitely interesting.
But yes, in battle. This is the effect of the Garurumon X. This is the level 4. Is when you have a Garurumon or Omnimon and its name would be deleted in battle, you can trash 2 cards with the same level in this Digimon's Digivolution cards to prevent that deletion. Keep in mind, when you attack security, that is still considered a battle.
Right.
It doesn't say battle between Digimon, it means that. So the idea is that you kind of go into the level 5, well, you go into Were Garurumon, the one that can swing twice and unsuspend. Let's just say you have 5 security. Swing at your opponent's security. Now, there's a lot of the cards underneath it that you're supposed to build a deck this way, where it's like if you have 8 or more cards in hand, gain 1,000. The Rookie has this, the In Training has this, the regular level 4, I forgot which one it is, but that one also gets another 1,000. So when you actually swing with the Were Garurumon, you're swinging for 9,000 DP, which is already pretty strong for a level 5. And you can do it twice if you really wanted to. So you're doing it once. That's 1 check to your opponent's security. You unsuspend. If it were to lose that battle, you can take 2 pieces from underneath it and trash them. You go into your Metal Garurumon. Now, the Metal Garurumon usually people play. Well, I've seen 2 different builds of it, but the one most people play is the one using the EX1 Metal Garurumon. It allows you to gain memory for every 4 cards in your hand. So then that gains you back the memory you need to go into your Metal Garurumon X. And the Metal Garurumon X is now going to be able to do multiple security checks to your opponent. So that's the kind of the build, where you want to go. Where at the end of all of that, you're doing 4 checks to your opponent's security.
All right, I'll compromise with you, and I'll put it at the bottom of A tier then. Yeah,
that's my card.
I didn't consider the you can attack multiple times with level 5s, and you don't have jamming. But if you got the level 4 that's going to help keep it alive in those security checks, I mean that's a totally fair way of thinking with it. So yeah, I'll definitely bump it up there because the amount of consistency it has, and then being able to swing multiple times before it even gets into its mega, and then just swing with the mega also because it keeps unsuspending itself over and over. Yeah, it's pretty good. I'll give you that one. Next, we got the War Greymon X, and I'm actually super excited for this one. Actually, I think right now I want to instantly kind of bump it up here. Really, I mean, it's War Greymon, right? So it's got access to all the great Greymon support out there. I mean, between Vmon and Agumon, I don't know who Bandai loves more because they give a ton of support for these guys. You would think that War Greymon or just Agumon decks in general would do better than they do. but there's so much to work with in these X antibody decks, and now that they're going to be super consistent because of all the X antibody stuff, I really feel like this traditional red style deck is actually in a really good position to compete. I mean, for sure. I mean, it's X antibody, so it's going to be super consistent, so it can punch up and be better than some of these decks, but then again, it also does fall off against certain other decks. I think it's really going to be match dependent on this. I'm not really sure where it's gonna fall. I mean, it even has a good matchup against Yellow Hybrid, one a delicate plan, but also the Greymon that helps it survive against option cards. So it almost doesn't even need the same with the Red Hybrid. It doesn't even need to play a delicate plan. It just kind of has it naturally built into the deck.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that the resource gain that War Greymon has, and the support it already has there, like there's so much love for the huge protagonist, this guy, and I agree with you. I think that he's going to be one of those very dangerous decks that you're going to see a lot of play of, especially people who are huge War Greymon fans in general and just had to stop playing him because he got power crept over time.
All right, next we got Shivamon. Shivamon just kind of doing Shivamon things, right? It's got a good matchup against Yellow Hybrid. It can potentially have a good matchup against other things. I think the reason it's going to be so far in the bottom of row tier, though, is just that anything that gets promoted at a raising area just kind of doesn't care about Shivamon, right? So the Grandest deck, the Alphamon decks, even Imperial just being able to DNA and just completely dodge anything it wants to do. And those decks don't even really have to worry about option cards either, right? Like, yeah, it's got a good matchup against this one thing that's really popular, but it's got a bad matchup against a lot of those other decks there. So I think that's just going to kind of keep it down there in the low 8 or low road tier.
Honestly, I'm not gonna even try. I'm putting him right to the bottom of B tier. But, I just don't see it being able to really beat out any of these other decks. Maybe the only deck it kind of can have a good match against is the Beelstar. Like I said, it's matchup dependent.
Next we got the Ordainmon, the new Meikumon. So it's like Mastemon, but now in level 7 form. So you can actually combine this with Mastemon, or you can have just like a turbo deck that just turbos into this. It is a very powerful card. I mean, it takes a long time to set up and get to a really good position, but geez, when it hits the field, it has a huge impact of just, clearing your opponent's field as well as recovering for a ton. So even if you are having to come from behind, it is a perfect come from behind card. I think the only thing that I'm not sure where to put it on the list, honestly. I don't know if it belongs in A, somewhere in Rogue. I don't know if it's dumpster tier. I don't know. Because the big one, one of the big cards is the new Regulamon. That is a huge play cost, right? And that huge play cost just allows your opponent to just completely bounce back. Like Yellow Hybrid, I mean, they don't care about this deck at all. I mean, you're not going to delete hardly anything on their field and recover that much, and then they're just going to like Gaia Force you. Yeah, you can come back, but you got to clear one of your own security to come back. Like, I don't know if you want to do that either, especially if they're just going to delete you again. I don't know. It just feels like a very heavy costed deck for potential payoff that might be very match dependent. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in it, but I would love to be proven wrong.
Well, I agree that Funny itself as a card is just unbelievably strong, and I've spoken to a bunch of yellow players at my locals and even like online, and just asking like, what's your favorite cards out of like BT9? What are you excited to get? And they're like, oh, I'm just gonna put Funimon in my Mastamon build.
Or Daimon.
So or Daimon.
Yeah.
Into there, and it has just like you said an amazing effect of just being able to play like recover to wipe your opponent's board and recover +1 for like multiple different cards. Like that to me is like just a reason to play it in general. But the rest of the support cards aren't really too, like, I guess you could say playable. Like, that is the key word there, is like, are they playable? Point is that I think it's a good tech card. I just think the deck itself is not going to do anything really spectacular.
Totally fair. Yeah, probably just like a tech into already built Mastemon decks. I think the Mekumon is also pretty nice. The security Digimon and the on deletion gain 2 memory inheritable. You know, if they want to delete your big mega, they're really going to have to pay out the nose for it. So I kind of dig that one as well. But yeah, Ordainemon as just itself as a whole deck, I don't know. This might just be our Mastemon spot on the list. And again, I don't know where to put this thing. It could literally go like anywhere. If you just want to view it as a Mastemon deck, it could be higher. But if you want to view it as just an Ordainemon deck, it might be lower.
If we're looking at this as a deck, and I would say it's trash deck. It's B. It's end of B. But if we're looking at it as Mastemon, I would put that closer to the beginning of Rogue. So. Honestly, I think that beginning of Rogue, because I think a lot of people I've seen also, even in BT10, Mastemon is still played. So I think it's definitely warranted that you can still play that in Rogue.
So next we got B tier, and a lot of these decks we've kind of seen in B tier already for a while now. I go back and forth on Beelzemon being here because it was terrible against D-Reaper, but now that D-Reaper is just kind of pushed to the wayside and, you know, out of the way, you know, maybe this is a little bit more validity to it now that it can actually get its abilities of deleting stuff. But it's also, again, very trash dependent, so you have to trash a whole bunch of stuff and then you can really start to pop off with it. So it takes time. It gets a couple like neat things, like we get the Wizardmon promo as a box topper, and then BT10 is when it gets a whole lot more support. I think it's just still kind of awkward. It's just, it doesn't have a whole lot of power unless you're really ramping up into your mega, and that requires a lot of setup. And then it's like defensive options aren't really there. It's got, you know, a couple option cards that it can kind of tech in, but the defense on it is pretty bad, right? Against a lot of these like super aggro decks, I think it's going to suffer. It might get lucky, but even still, I think it's just going to suffer against too many of these decks. All right, so speaking of decks that take a lot of setup, Sakuyamon. Until Miko mode, I think in BT10, I think this deck is just going to be way down here. This deck, when it pops off, oh my god, does it pop off. It's crazy efficient. It plays out lots of things for free, but dang, if you don't get Eureka in play ASAP, this deck just falls apart and does nothing, just about. I just don't think it's good unless you have Eureka on field.
I think later it will absolutely be not to mess with this deck. So like when on my market watches, some of my previous market watches, I've actually even said, you know, don't get rid of this card, or like pick up like the Rikas, the Tamers, the alternate art Tamers from EX2 if you're looking to play this deck, because it does bounce back. You will see this played in future sets, and definitely it will be more of a rogue deck at that point, or even possibly even used as a possible A tier deck.
Next we got Machine Dramon. Actually kept it on the list. I debated taking it off, but we actually get a pretty decent amount of support in BT9. Basically, it's just going to steal all of Gaiomon's support, right? All the new red and black stuff. The new level 5 that can delete Tamers. I think that's a fantastic addition to this deck. Just some really neat tech cards that you can just work in. I think it's still just a solid card, a solid deck that can just kind of come out of nowhere. I know I played it against it in the Ultimate Cup, and like it really like put me through my paces. Like I almost lost against it just because it's still just a very solid deck, and getting more support anytime a deck gets more support, I think instantly kind of makes it still viable. But even still, even talking it up like I am, I still think it's a big, heavy costed deck. It's a ton of memory, and it can be an issue with that. You got a lot. It's got pretty good consistency and draw power and stuff like that. But I still think it just kind of comes back to it's very heavy costed. That kind of brings it down a little bit. And if they just remove it, like you play against Yellow Hybrid and they just like remove whatever threat you put on field, then you're just kind of, you know, back to square one with it.
I don't know where I would put it, honestly. I'm a little lost on Machine Dramon. I love it as a play style. It's kind of one of the only last like Mega Zoo type play style decks in our current game until maybe something else comes out. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know where to put it. Where would you put it?
I mean, I think it's just right where it's at. Like, I think it's still worthy of the table. And whenever I put something on the table, I think, like, giving it enough of a, head nod of, this deck is worthy of at least making the list, because there's a ton of decks in this game, right? If I was really to build a list with every deck in this game, this list would be huge. I'm not going to do that because most of those decks lose to everything on this list. Like, literally, even the stuff in B tier here, a lot of decks just hard lose to it. I mean, Sakuyamon, Beelzemon can blow out, any deck from BT4 and before, right? I mean, if they're on this list, they're still viable enough to contend with, the meta, right? I think they can still stand up to the meta in some capacity. Maybe some of these A tier decks, they're almost never going to win against, but there is the slight possibility of it. And then the B tier does have, pretty decent matches against the rogue tier. The rogue tier being those decks that can punch up into A tier, but also the B tier can punch up into rogue tier. And so I still think it's worthy of being on the list. But again, like you said, it's a Mega Zoo deck. Man, that's a lot of memory. Next, we got Diaboromon, and I think it's another one of those decks that's just, it's getting further and further away from having any recent support. And because of that, of course, it's going to start falling off. It's not overly efficient, and a lot of these other decks that we're seeing are extremely efficient. Between the X antibodies being able to evo for 0 and just draw and draw and draw, and then some of these other decks that are just really good at what they do, and then Diaboromon is still just really slow and chugging. Yeah, we can throw out a lot of bodies on field, but against some of these decks, I don't care how many bodies you have. I'm still just gonna nuke your board or stun your whole board with blue, or I'm just gonna outpace you so bad with my OTK deck that it doesn't matter unless you specifically have like 6 blocker tokens on field specifically. You're not gonna win, right? And I feel like that's just kind of how this deck is.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that the further out we get, unless something comes out in 1 or 2 sets that gives a Diaboromon a little bit more support, it really is not going to do as much.
Next, I kind of just wanted to throw this on here just so it's on people's radar. Jellymon, we're still a long ways off from a dedicated Jellymon deck, right? But that said, the tournament pack tamer that we got, that anything with Jellymon as an inheritable gets jamming, that's really, really good. Like, that, just that combo of the Tamer and the Jellymon rookie feels really good. They've got the new level 4 that can basically attack twice. Attack twice with, jamming is always super solid. So I feel like just having Jellymon, like, on people's radar to think about is just worthy of at least putting it on the list here. I just don't know, what tech this is going to fit into, but it feels really solid. Next, we got Justimon. I feel like it's even a little bit too low here. We're getting new support for it. That's really cool in BT9. I think it's still going to just suffer from the same stuff it's always kind of suffered from, though, is like some of these other decks, it's very dependent on combo pieces, drawing the stuff you need. Every time I've play tested with this or against this, it seems to brick really bad. Like, if they don't get the Rios in play fast enough, like, it starts to really suffer. And if they don't hit the Tamer just right, or they don't hit the certain key pieces like the level 5s or the megas, like, the deck just falls apart really, really bad. And then the fact that it can swing a whole bunch of times and has pretty high DP, but it's black, so it doesn't have access to a delicate plan, which we've talked about several times. And again, in this format, that's really crucial. And with it being as slow as it is and slowly evoing up, and it has to evo in the main area, right? It can't even hide in raising area like a lot of these other decks can. It has to, like, win digivolving effect constantly with a lot of its stuff. And I think, like, that's super dangerous, is when you have your mega evoing up in the battle area just to get wiped out before you can even attack with it. Very scary. So I think it's a cool deck. I love Justimon. I think he's super awesome Digimon, but he has way too much against it, against a lot of these other meta decks.
Deep Brigade form of this deck, and against even like the other BT8 stuff, it just doesn't catch up. It's very hard to play against anything, but it does get future support, so it definitely is a deck that I will hopefully see kind of move up the B or rogue desk.
And that's going to do it for you. I think we're in a really good position here with this final where we've ended things here. Some stuff could be higher or lower, just very dependent on how things shape up, how it plays against, and how people just pilot them, right? There could be some crazy text that people have up their sleeve and completely surprise us, and I'm totally okay for that. But again, this is just a prediction, guys. Like, don't take it to heart. You know, if you're even this far in the video, this is like an hour and a half. Like, this is just a guess, right? A best guess from players that really love to play this game and play this game a lot. Again, I want to thank DigiWatch you for coming in and supporting me here, and just, you know, having the be able to bounce ideas off of, and just kind of get a better idea of some stuff like the Metal Garurumon that I completely missed.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.